time to go. Hello, everybody. I am H. Howells, and I am so delighted to have been asked here today by the Gray Muzzle organization to talk about celebration as the antidote to anticipatory grief.
And we are so happy to have you here, Dr. Howells. We offer these monthly webinars that are free to the public to educate them about the senior best friends and family members in their lives. I'm Denise Fleck, the board president, and senior dogs are truly my soft spot. I think I love them so much because they still have so much life to live and so much love to give. But as we all know, nothing lasts forever. And that's what you're here to help us through today. And I am so glad that everybody's joining in here because these dogs are going to always remain in our hearts. But we really want to celebrate their time that they're here together with us so that we can really cherish those moments, make them the best for our pets, and then, potentially help them and us through those transitionary times. So for today's webinar, Dr. Howells is going to share how celebration can be a super-powered balm for anticipatory grief. And, whether we know this is happening or whether it catches us unexpectedly, those, ultimate goodbyes are really, really difficult to contend with. But we just want to make sure that life well lived continues, until the very last moment, and that we treasure our pets while we still have them. Now, let me tell you a little bit about H, or Dr. Howells. Prior to veterinary school, she had careers in teaching, music, and food service, and she also taste tested a few other unrelated jobs. After a decade in general clinical practice, experiencing burnout and exhaustion firsthand, I know many people have been there, and many people in the animal welfare space certainly have too. She became deeply invested in fostering well-being for veterinary professionals. In 2018, she launched Agents of Change Coaching, doing health, life, and team coaching with a whole person approach. And then when COVID hit 2020, at the height of the pandemic, she opened Peace Wings, her veterinary house call, hospice, and euthanasia practice. These days, H continues to build both practices while remaining active in Colorado's veterinary community. She is a mom, an outdoors enthusiast, and an amateur cook who enjoys sharing food and wine with others. We'll have to talk later. She is making more music and feeling more alive as she grows closer to living with balance. And I must say, she's not alone on the screen here today. She has twins.
Only one of them is here right now, but this is Tim.
So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Howells, and please put in your questions as they come to mind, and we will pop right in and have her answer. So I'm going to sit back and turn off my camera and enjoy along with all of you.
Thank you so much, Denise. It's such an honor to be here with everybody. I hope you can hear me fine at home. I really do love to be interactive. So please don't hold questions for the end. I know I will also have many viewers who are watching this video after the fact. So if you would like to engage with me in any way, send me an email, send me a little text. I'm going to have my contact information at the end. And I want to hear all your questions before, during, and after. Any comments, anything you have to share. I'm here for all of it. So I wanted to start off with just a little reminder of why we are here. And you know it, you showed up today for a reason. But what is the meaning of life is kind of a softball question to start off with. So here we go. The best thing that I've ever seen was actually on the side of a package of a Celestial Seasonings tea box. And it said, the meaning of life is not what we are here for, but who we are here for. And so all of these pictures on this slide are pictures of the human-animal bond. And we know that the human-animal bond is sacred. We see it. We see this guy in the center towards the middle trying to sleep through his puppy's foot across his eye. We see this woman loving on a cow. We see we see the dog helping his person heal from PTSD. In the veteran picture, we see this little girl on the top right who's not alone because she has her dog. And in all the spaces of our life, the human animal bond is sacred. And so when it's time to think about hospice and euthanasia for somebody we love, the bond we feel we stand to lose is deep and unspeakable. And in my early career as a veterinarian, I heard a lot of people make confessions to me that went something like, I am embarrassed to admit this, but I am finding it harder to weather the loss of my pet than my fill in the blank. Home after a fire, my spouse, my partner, my parent. And I came to realize very quickly that that sentiment is normal, because our relationships with our pets are so pure and so deep. We share so few words with them, and so much passes between us. Our animals see us through disability, loneliness, loss, transition, our hardest times and our greatest fears, and they have no judgment at all. At the same time, we can't hide anything from them. So we're really vulnerable with the animals in our lives, and they don't judge us. So working through all the feelings about facing the loss of somebody with whom you share this kind of bond is intense. So I just want to acknowledge that straight off the bat. This is a little bit about me. As Denise said, I do have a checkered past, but these are the important parts of my life right now. So I'll give you a little introduction. My life is a patchwork quilt of coaching, practicing, doing music stuff. But this, on the left-hand side of the screen, is my old lady fire-breathing dragon cat. Her name is Dea, and she is going to turn 18 next month. And this woman shares my coffee every day. I have a coffee problem. And she also has a coffee problem. So she comes and drinks my coffee every day with me. And it delights me when I can still see her on the third floor of my townhome drinking milk off the top. This is on the bottom right corner is my youngest human child with my pit bull, who is going to be 4 this year. His name is Ramon. Here is our python down here in the center with my oldest son. Here in the top right, I'm playing outside in a slot canyon in Utah. I'm located in Colorado. I know all of you are all over the country, but I love playing outside as much as possible. And then this guy in these pictures is my partner and music partner, and he's sitting here on the couch in the bottom picture with the 2 little kittens who you will see in this video. So Tim is on my lap right now, and Bruce is somewhere close by, and I'm sure he'll make his Zoom debut here soon enough. So I'm lucky to have a lot of love in my life and a lot of folks I really want to be here for. But I know that losing Dea, who's my heart cat over here, is on my horizon. And so this is stuff I'm thinking about in a personal way as well. Oh, goodness. Death. There are dragons here. It's so hard to talk about. And when I first was in veterinary school and I took this oncology class to learn about cancer treatment in pets, one of the professors raised his hand at the very beginning of that, and he said, I would like to see a show of hands in this class. How many of you, of the 90 people sitting in this class, regularly talk to your friends and family about death? And I think about 5 people raised their hands, and I was one of them. Because at the time, my closest friend, Mia, who lives in New York City, she had just lost her grandmother to cancer. She had just lost her younger brother to suicide on his 21st birthday. And she herself had moved back from Japan to help her mom through her mom's hospice for ovarian cancer. And so she and I have been best friends for 25 years now. And at the time, we were speaking every day about issues of grief and death and life. But I also know this is a taboo topic. And so I want to talk about it more than usual today and really call this out because I think it's important to make sure we're able to discuss bravely something that's going to happen to all of us. I also think that death and acknowledging its presence in our lives and the role that it has as a part of life is a very, very important thing, because it helps us distill everything. When we are facing the death of somebody that we love, whether that's far off on the horizon or imminent, it whittles down the static of our lives to what simply matters most. So if you will go with me on a weird journey for a moment, I know you're behind a computer screen and nobody can see what you're doing in class, but I want you to close your eyes for a minute and just think, feel, what are your biggest dreams in life? And how would those change if you only had 6 months to live? What if you only had 6 weeks? And how about if you found out suddenly you only had 6 hours? It's heavy, right? So when I was asked all of this in rapid succession and I got down to the 6 hours question, I began to weep, and I confessed to myself that all I really want in the last 6 hours of my life is for everyone I know and everyone I love to know that I love them. In the bitter end, with only hours left, nothing else matters. And your answer might be different, but that was my answer. And whatever your answer was, I want you to hold that in your heart for a few seconds. Because at some point we are going to face the death of our elderly animals. And I think that if we can actually keep that in our hearts as a reality rather than a distant thing we're pushing off over the horizon, we're going to have the ability to distill our experiences, to take what is really the essence, what is really the joy, and bring it home and make good, lasting memories. So, now that we're there and we've agreed that we're going to talk about death, what in the world is there to say about it to ourselves, to the ones we love, to the friends we have who are experiencing the loss of a loved one? It almost doesn't matter what we say as long as we keep talking to each other. I will always remember talking to Mia in the aftermath of the death of her grandmother, her mother, and her brother, and hearing her say over and over again that the people who failed to say anything to her in the wake of her loss because they were afraid of saying the wrong thing were the most painful people to be around. The silence of the people who said nothing after those losses was way more painful than the words of the people who put their foots in their mouths. Their feet, sorry, I can't speak. But I want you to know that not only is it important to talk about it, but it's a comfort to normalize this and to just recognize it for what it is. Now, here's our first little cartoon about death. When I have gone to euthanasia house calls and had people come to my home and euthanize their pets in my living room, at one time I had a family member sitting in the other room, just kind of keeping my dog quiet while I was helping somebody say goodbye to a pet. And he said to me afterward, he goes, "There is a surprising amount of laughter in euthanasia." And I said, yes, there can be. There is also a hilarity and a ridiculousness to things when everything is so distilled. There are times when you just have to laugh instead of cry. And there's times when that laughter brings in a bunch of joy. So I love this little cartoon of the lady flirting with death in his sweatshirt. I love how time feels so scrambled. But this picture in the middle, it's a little harder to see what that one is. And it is a picture of a pole in the middle of a gas station. So this long black thing running down the front of the screen is actually the gas pump hose that I had pulled up in a gas station. I was putting gas in my car. And this is glitter all over the side of these posts across the whole gas station. Everything that has paint on it is also covered in glitter. And it just warms my heart. And I keep going back to that gas station and again, because it makes my day every time. to see that this is a gas station. It's a necessary part of life. You have to put gas in your car. There's no getting around any of this. And yet someone took the time to put glitter in the grimiest spot you just have to go through in your day-to-day life. And so that's how I want us to think about this distilled time, is that this is a place for us to choose happiness, choose to laugh, choose to find the ridiculousness and stuff, and really look for the glitter in the grime. That's kind of a core value to me. Now, what in the world is anticipatory grief? It's the kind of thing we don't talk about very much. We don't even talk about grief very much. There are a lot of definitions for grief, and I want you to kind of think what your definition would be. And I'm going to take a deep breath and a little sip of coffee and give you space on that for a second. When most people think of grief, they think of a loss. They think of a loss of someone in their life, whether that's a person or an animal. But one of the best definitions of grief I have ever heard from a psychologist was that grief is what we feel after a change in a relationship. Wow, right? And it makes sense. We might grieve if we lose our job. We might grieve if a friend moves away across the country. They're still our friend. We still love them. They're still here. We can still talk to them, but we can't pass by for a cup of tea on the way home when we drive past their house at night. So grief is any change in relationship. And I think as we are with our animals throughout their lives, our relationship with them changes in different stages. So once we enter the geriatric years, once we know a pet is reaching the end of their lifespan, or once we get a terminal diagnosis, all of a sudden that reality of death that we can push off over the horizon when our kittens are 18 weeks old is suddenly present and right there in front of us on the road, on the path. And so it's normal to feel some anticipatory grief. And these are the symptoms, what you see on the screen. If you were to look up anticipatory grief in a psychology journal, these are, we start to feel anxiety, difficulty concentrating, preoccupation, we're worried, our eating patterns change. But I put 3 stars and 3 arrows next to guilt, because guilt hurts especially bad. And a lot of people end up feeling a lot of guilt when facing the end of an animal's life because of all the responsibility we take on and how seriously we take it, how deeply we care when we're the sole care provider for an animal who can't provide care for themselves on their own. And so for a lot of people, entering this space of analysis paralysis hell is what anticipatory grief feels like. Analysis paralysis hell. But every mental health professional I've ever worked with, and while I am not a mental health professional myself, I've worked with many of them in this grief counseling realm, and every single one of them would say, guilt is actually counterproductive to your healing when you're grieving something. And I think anticipatory grief is actually the most beautiful opportunity we can get. If somebody looks at you and says in a veterinary office, your pet may have 6 months to live, that's a gift because they did not say 6 hours. You have some time. You have some time to sit in this space of anticipatory grief and actually choose the happiness and the glitter and the grime. And I really believe that if we celebrate when we're in this time, it really changes things and takes away that guilt. And so when I am doing hospice care with pets or grief counseling prior to a euthanasia visit, one of my biggest goals is to take away any notion that's causing a person any guilt. Because I will tell you, I have not had one person call me ever that did not care about their pet. I have not had one person call me ever who wasn't doing the absolute best they can. And I have not had one person call me ever whose love I did not just admire and cherish and feel honored to see between them and their animal. So here is the killer question. Am I killing my pet? So when we get into hospice, people have this preconceived notion that it's about prolonging suffering, but it should be about prolonging joy. And when they're looking at the timing of euthanasia, they get very tortured about this decision. And so they're saying to themselves, terrible tornadoes of emotions are happening. And they're saying to themselves, and they're saying to me, all kinds of things. I don't want to play God. It isn't my right to decide. They have a lot of words to talk about how weighty it is, the decision of whether to euthanize and when. If they feel they're going too soon, or they worry they're going too soon, they're worried they weren't dedicated enough. They're worried they're robbing their animal of joy, moments of joy they could have had. If they worried they waited too long, they worry they were selfish. They worried their pet suffered. But in the end, under all of this is this stabbing question: am I killing my pet? And the answer is absolutely not. You are not. Nobody is. We can't control biology. It's kidney disease that's killing your pet. It's cancer that's killing your pet. It's the simple end of their natural lifespan. And the fact that the body has an expiration date that's killing their pet. And what they are doing is simply having to face the opportunity they have in front of them to make it suck a little less. And that's a very important reframing point when we're looking at the timing of euthanasia, because there is no right time, but it matters greatly what we do with the time that we have, whether that's 6 hours after your pet got admitted to the emergency hospital, or 6 months after a cancer diagnosis, or 6 years after you adopted a senior pet. Whatever that is, the timing doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with the time that you have. And so we've got to figure out a way to bring joy back into this. And so this is what I was circling around when I said hospice is not to prolong suffering. It is to prevent suffering and to promote joy and to preserve quality of life. And I always tell people this when I'm looking at taking on a patient for hospice or euthanasia. I say, listen, quality of life is made up of 2 ingredients: comfort and joy. And the comfort, that's the job of the veterinary team, but the joy, that's the family's job. And I'm here to give you homework about joy. And they go, what? Homework about joy? I'm like, listen, it couldn't be any better than this. So in the hospice space, it's a really cool area of medicine. I get to play, I get to exceed the speed limit on some things. I get to take some chances to bring some comfort that would have been too risky to reach for at an earlier stage of life. All of that is really cool. However, I was in a phone conversation with a woman the other day who was considering bringing me in to help with some hospice for her dog. And she said that she called me because her husband had looked at her and said, I think it's time we started giving Lola sausage. And they had been restricting her from this her entire life. They were watching her weight. They didn't want her pancreas to catch on fire. But I said, he's right. It's time to start giving Lola sausage and making that girl smile, because it is the job of the family to provide the joy. And when you focus on that, when you get some joy homework and some homework about celebration, it's the most amazing and productive place to channel your worry. To put all the effort you're spending into worrying, into making memories happen, is a gift. Oh my gosh, Tim is scratching on my lap here. Okay, let me find our next. So I'm going to tell you a story about the transformative power of joy homework. And there's a kind of a funny picture on this slide. So I'll give you a minute to read this while I have a little sip of coffee, because I really wanted a picture of an ice cream sandwich for this slide, and you'll see why when we get into the story. But I thought this was the funniest thing I've ever seen on the internet. Okay, so I am visiting over the course of many months with a hospice family whose dog is having worsening and worsening mobility issues. And the problem is that he is a 100-pound dog, and his family both of the people that live in his household are over 70 years old. So it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to help him and support him physically. And so I come in to do some hospice stuff, and we're helping with mobility, and it's becoming clear that it's really time for him to say goodbye, that he's in pain that we can't control anymore. But this couple absolutely could not wrap their hearts around that. And they were different every week. One week I showed up and the husband of the couple said, "Oh my God, it's time. I can't watch him be like this for one more day." And the wife would say, "Oh my God, but this, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready." And then the next week they totally flip-flopped. And so finally I leveled with them and I said, his pain score is too high. I'm tapped out. There's nothing more that I can do. I really want to encourage you to do the right thing for him and let him go. But I need us to really talk about where we are here. And I'm going to give you some homework this week. And I said, remember when we started this hospice relationship and you told me that one of his 5 greatest joys was ice cream? Well, what if you just started giving him an ice cream every day? And the dog's mom looks at me and she looks kind of side to side because there's chocolate involved in this story, and dogs are not supposed to have chocolate, right? And she says, "Well, I gave him an ice cream sandwich last night." And I was like, yes, you gave him an ice cream sandwich last night. That's excellent. I hope you bought a big box because I want you to give him an ice cream sandwich every single night. And she said, "But the chocolate." And I was like, there's 2 chocolate wafers on there. He's a 100-pound dog. He will be fine. Let him have an ice cream sandwich every night. And we talked about how important it was for them to make good memories with him. And before I left that visit, I said, I really, really want to encourage you to set a date to say goodbye to him because he hurts a lot. And if you don't want to keep that, we'll cancel it. It's fine. But I bet if you give him an ice cream sandwich every night this week, when I come back, everyone is going to be ready. And they said to me, "Well, what do you think is going to change with him in the next week that hasn't changed in the last 6 months?" And I said, "He's not going to change at all. What's going to change is you." And they looked at each other and they said, "Oh." And sure enough, I came back the next week and we gave him 5 ice cream sandwiches in the front yard on a sunny morning, and he got to say goodbye. And what really flipped that script for them was they needed to feel that they were spending their time on joy instead of worry. They needed to celebrate. And so I want to bring you around to this beautiful, beautiful Jewish idea of simcha, which is it's the state of celebration. Simcha is Hebrew for a festive occasion. And I want all the days of all of our senior pets to be filled with celebration all the time. And I can't count for you how many times somebody who's one of my clients has said, "Oh my God, I was sitting here in this terrible, tortured space, and you came in here and told me to celebrate my pet." And I was so floored to be given permission to do that. But I think it's not only something we need permission for, but it's imperative. And this Rabbi Nachman said it is a mitzvah to be in a state of celebration always. And I really believe that one of our superpowers in this world is to get to choose what meaning we make out of things. And so if we adopt a senior pet, if we have a senior pet, if we have a pet who's starting to have some hospice needs, celebrating in the face of what is impending is a revolutionary act, and it is the most life-affirming thing that you can possibly do. So, knowing what you know about me, this is all going to make sense from here on out. Happiness, I believe, is a courageous choice. By choosing celebration, joy, and happiness in the face of loss and adversity, we have to be a little vulnerable. And so I don't know how many of you out there have read or experienced the work of Brene Brown, but she's somebody I love very much. She's a shame researcher from a university in Texas, and she talks a lot about vulnerability. And she's always palatable to everybody, even very data-driven people, such as people in the veterinary field, because all of her words come from thousands of interviews. She said, I'm not just making up touchy-feely words, I'm taking the words that pop up with a statistical frequency out of thousands of interviews. And so she did thousands of interviews around the idea of vulnerability and asked everybody, what does it mean to you to have some vulnerability? And they said things like that she expected, such as, I felt vulnerable holding my mom's hand when she was in hospice care, or my spouse lost their job when I was 7 months pregnant with our child, and I felt vulnerable during those times. What she didn't expect to hear people say about vulnerability is people who said, I feel vulnerable when looking at the face of my best friend and realizing she might not be here all the time. I feel vulnerable watching my healthy children sleep in their cribs at night because it just gets in my heart so much. And so she discovered that when we're trying to be guarded against our feelings, when we're guarding ourselves against grief or loss or being hurt by a situation or a circumstance or a person, we're closing out the risk, we're closing out the pain, but we're also closing out the joy and the connection and the meaning. And so it takes a little vulnerability to choose happiness in the face of a hard time. But I love this quote from Brene Brown where she says, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage are not always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And so I think of myself as coming in and encouraging people to celebrate their pets. More than giving permission, I want to encourage them. And I really mean every piece of the word encourage. I'm putting courage in because it takes some courage to choose this vulnerable thing of celebration in the face of a loss. So how do we do it? How do we give this joy homework? We have to let the heart do its job. We have to go ahead and feel. It's important. There's a book that I love very much by a journalist named John Katz. His name is spelled Katz. And he wrote a beautiful book called Going Home, Finding Peace When Pets Die. And in this book, he writes just a bunch of vignettes of people who are experiencing an impending loss or have lost a pet or are fixing to lose their pet or whatever the case may be. And he writes these little vignettes and each one has a point, and each one has a point about relieving guilt and encouraging celebration. So this is a book after my own heart. And in one of those stories, the best story about joy that I read in there was a veteran who had this golden retriever who he got after he came home from the Afghan war. And that dog at 10 years old got a diagnosis of heart failure. And so he knew there was limited time left. And his wife said, you know, you need to give this dog the perfect day. And so she took their kids and went to her mom's house for like 24, 36 hours. And he stayed home. And with that dog, he spent the entire day doing with that dog everything that dog could still do that brought him joy. They watched a movie together. The dog couldn't play ball anymore, but they went to the park and rolled some balls around in the grass. They sat outside for a while. He gave him the perfect day. And then when his dog's time came to finally die, he felt so much peace because of the memories they made. So I actually encourage people to make a bucket list for their pet. And it does not have to be when death is imminent. I will tell you, I read John Katz's story about this when my previous dog was 10 and he lived to 14. And I made a decision when my dog was 10 years old that I was going to take a day off of work every 6 months and just go off with my dog and give him the perfect day. And I thought to myself, I don't know how many of these days I'll get, but I want all of them. And he wants all of them. And so we would hike and we would make popcorn together because I it was a long history with us and popcorn. I'm sure you can identify with these things, but I ended up getting to do that like 9 or 10 times. And so you don't need death imminent on the horizon to start experiencing joy. But I do encourage people to make a bucket list when they start working with me. And for those people who are not as old as I am, who are not of my vintage or later, you might not know what a bucket list is. But on the long list of funny expressions about death, kick the bucket is an expression for death. And so there was a really great movie with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson where there are two, retirement age guys who wake up in the same hospital room discovering their own terminal diagnoses. And they kind of make this plan together, even though they've never met before, to live out all the dreams they wish they could do before they died and just make it happen. And they called it the bucket list, the list of things we need to do before we kick the bucket. And the movie is amazing. So if you haven't seen it, you should. And if you're way younger than me, you might not know the context of that. But I do work with families and say, I need you to sit down as a family and we're going to start the conversation together and you're going to finish it as a family after I leave. And I want you to really think through what your dog or cat would want. What would make his or her perfect day? And also, what are the everyday joys you want to put on that list? And how often can you make those happen? And what are the big grand gestures that you need to see just one time, just so you can have the peace of knowing that there wasn't some big dream unfulfilled. And so an example of an everyday joy is the damn ice cream sandwich. You can give an ice cream sandwich every day, and my goodness, why wouldn't you? Shredding paper is something that many cats love. And I recently had a cat hospice patient, and his family said, oh man, he really loves to shred paper. We want to see him shred some paper while he's still here. But you know what? He likes to shred it best if he thinks he's not supposed to have it. And I said, well, how much of a mess are you willing to let him make? Because what I want you to do is hide little bits of newspaper around the house in corners, stacked up in places like you would normally stack it, and let him rip the daylights out of it and not care how big of a mess he makes. And then try to sneak up on him and take a picture of him and kind of catch him in the act. And they loved that. Their cat shredded a whole bunch of newspaper. So those are everyday joys. Make sure you get your cat to where they can sit in the sunbeam. Make sure you get your dog outside in the snow if they're a husky and that's their favorite season and you're there in that season. Just make sure you see it. And then the other side of the bucket list is the big grand gestures. So I've had people say, I need to see my dog swim one more time in the lake where we went camping every summer. I'm like, well, go do that. How soon can you take off work and make that happen? A lot of families need a kid or a family member to fly back from out of state and get to say goodbye one last time. We need to make that stuff happen. And one of the best ones I've seen recently, I had a hospice patient who was a 7-year-old Belgian Malinois who had degenerative myelopathy. So he was bright, alert, totally himself. The rest of his body was happy and healthy, but he was losing the use of his legs. And during our initial hospice consult, I was sitting still. I did not throw the ball for him because I was sitting on the ground, letting him walk up to me and kiss me. I did not throw the ball for him because I knew it was hard for him to go get it with his disability at the time. But he still returned and brought me ball after ball after ball while I was sitting there until his toenails were bloody, coming up and down the porch. And I looked at his family and I said, you know what this guy needs? He needs a ball pit. Can you imagine if he was surrounded by 300 balls? So I had them go on Amazon. And you can buy ball pit balls like they have at Chuck E. Cheese for like a box of 150 of them for $20 or something. So I said, however many of these things you want to get them, get different sizes, shapes, colors, whatever. But I want you to take him out in the yard one day and have him come out in the yard and just find hundreds of balls waiting for him. And they sent me the most beautiful videos of that. And we cried together and they were like, this was amazing. The ball pit was amazing. And we're so glad we did it. Now we have no idea what to do with these 300 balls, but oh my God, the memory that we made is incredible. So whether a family member or a caretaker is enacting these daily joys or these grand gestures, or both, it doesn't matter. The effect is the same. It's a gift for the animal, it's a gift for the people involved, and it creates these lasting memories that will stay with us for the rest of our lives after the one we love is gone on. It gives us a place to channel our worry. It brings joy to everybody. And then when the time finally does come to say goodbye, there's so much more peace, there's so much more clarity, and there's so much less guilt because the time that they had was used really well. So this is how we relieve guilt and increase peace. Obviously, it doesn't take away the pain of everything. Grief still hurts. There's no way around that. And it lasts for a long time. And it should. That is as it should be. And we have to normalize that for ourselves as well. It's a terrible paradox we have to live through to be human. We have to let go of the being, the animal whose body we can no longer touch, and at the same time hold on forever to the love that stays behind. We have to feel all of it. We have to let that in. And so grief still hurts, but it hurts better when what you feel can be held and given space and respect by somebody who isn't afraid of your feelings. And I am grateful every day for all the love I get to see. So it's good to talk to the people you love about death. It's good to recognize that it's there, let it distill your time, and let it open the door to joy. Because when you open the door to joy, you are going to be filled with gratitude. I would say the most common question that I get anywhere ever, whether it's in a talk or at a house call or on the phone, is, how do you do this job? And here's my answer. Gratitude is my number one core value. And every day I get asked to bring comfort, and I get to swim in love. And every day I get to see people who look at their pet and realize the treasure they have while they still have it. And that's what makes my world go around. Every time I see that kind of love, that is the fruition of someone telling and showing someone they love exactly how they feel about them. And it fulfills all my deepest wishes in this world. And every time I see it, my world is a little closer to the way I want to be. So because of that, I'm okay swimming in death. There's this distillation that occurs no matter what kind of day I'm having. I'm constantly reminded that tomorrow is not guaranteed, and that I damn well better pay attention to what is really important. And that's the final thing that I think celebration makes us do, is it makes us pay attention to the joy that we have. It's easy to get lost in the weeds. It's easy to know the loss is coming. It's easy to get lost in making sure you're doing everything perfectly and showing up to appointments on time and giving the right medication at the right time. But celebration calls us into the present moment and makes us have to be present for the joy and the goodness that is in front of us right now. And so I find encouraging people to celebrate to really change my life as well and change the way I walk through this world. And so providing end-of-life care is a gift. And I suspect it's more of a gift for me than for anybody else that I serve. So that's that. This is why I believe that celebration is the antidote to anticipatory grief. And my God, it has changed my life. And I hope in some small way it will change yours. It will encourage you to enjoy the moment, to feel the sun on your face and the wind in your hair and your finger in your pet's fur. Sending out love to all of you. And I would love to hear any questions that anybody has, any discussion, any comments. I'm going to leave this up for a second so everybody can take a picture of this contact information, and then I'll stop sharing so we can just chat.
Dr. Howells, you truly are a gift to pets and the people who love them. I'm choked up, but in a good way. And I can imagine, like, the question you get, how do you do this? Listening to a talk like this is probably very difficult for a lot of people. But if they had heard you, they would realize it wasn't so difficult, that you did bring out that comfort and joy. So I see some questions coming in, so I'm just going to talk while they're coming in here. But what I really want to encourage is everybody that's watching this live or that is watching the recording, please share it with somebody, because like I said, it's a difficult thing to think about. But Dr. Howells has expressed it in such an amazing way and kind of changed our perspective on how we think about things. You know, not that you only have 6 months, that it's better than 6 hours. And I love about starting the bucket list early. But I mean, you may already be in that, I don't want to say predicament, but in that situation or that stage of life where, you know, you can't start it early, but there are so many things you can do. The ball story was wonderful. And, you know, sometimes pets are already disabled to some degree, and maybe you can't take them places, but you can bring things to them. So I think it's so important that we be in the moment with them like they always are with us. And while I'm looking at these questions, there's one thing that comes to my mind, that, you know, it's so important for us to feel the comfort and joy, because how do you feel? Animals are perceptive. They pick up on our emotions, don't they? So if we're glum and sad, doesn't it make it more difficult for them?
I want to address that. I actually don't think so. I show up to so many houses where people are like, I'm sorry, I'm crying. I was going to try not to cry today because I want to be brave for my pet. And I look straight at them and I'm like, well, stop it. Because dogs, cats, 5,000 years, but dogs have been getting paid to know people better than we know ourselves for 100,000 years. If you don't think they see through your bull hockey and see your emotions, you are kidding yourself. And because this is one of your closest relationships, this pet in front of you is someone you can absolutely be vulnerable with. So I want to take that to me, that feels like a myth buster of like, I have to be strong for my pet. You already did that.
I love that, because, you know, some people do feel like they need to go cry in the corner and then put on that happy face. And that happy face is really forced in that respect. So that's wonderful to hear that. Again, you know, changing perspectives in our brains. And you're right, our pets probably know us better than we know them. So they know when we're, you know, putting on the face. So here, let's see what we've got here. Thank you so much for this presentation. A year ago this week, I said goodbye to a beloved senior dog. Even though she had advanced cancer and it was her time, she was distressed and frightened at the end, so the euthanasia was upsetting for both of us. Do you have any advice for making peace after the fact when a goodbye didn't go as planned?
Ooh, that's it. Let me think about that for a second, because that certainly happens. I want you to think, first of all, I know this is a public space, so we might not feel comfortable sharing everything, but I would love to know your name and your dog's name, first of all, so I can hug you through all of that. But what I think is that, yes, those were the last moments, but they were by far not the only moments. And yes, there's a lot of gravity there, but it doesn't nearly add up to the sum total of all the experiences you had with your beautiful girl before she died. I want you to have, this is going to make everybody cry, including me, but I want you to have the grace for yourself that I know your dog has for you.
Heather and Elfie, by the way, Dr. Howells, Heather and Elfie are thanking you for your compassion. So that was from Heather and little Elfie, who's gone on to get belly rubs in heaven now, hopefully.
100%. So not every moment is glorious. There are a lot of inglorious things that happen in the moment of death, and none of it matters as much as a life well lived. And I know from your presence here that happened, that life well lived happened. So I want you to have the same grace for yourself that your dog has for you. I'm holding you in love right now. I think just keeping a little perspective around it is the best thing, because there was a whole lifetime there of shared wonderfulness, and that is never ever eclipsed by a moment of tension.
That's
Never.
beautiful. And I will say, the whole lifetime, because a lot of us do adopt seniors and we feel like, we haven't had their whole lifetime and we don't know what came on before.
Right.
But when you connect with a senior, you feel like it's their whole lifetime. And I'm sure they do too. They forget whatever else might have come before. So Heather says, that means so much to her. Thank you, Dr. Howells. And I have a few more for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Christy says, I'm struggling with anticipatory grief. My dog is only 4 and has been diagnosed with a terminal cancer. We are working on her bucket list and taking lots of pictures and videos. I just can't get over the fact that it's not fair. It's hard to lose any dog, but she's so young. Any suggestions?
I have a lot of 4-letter words to say about cancer. I probably can't say them on a recording. I think allow yourself to be a little angry at the unfairness of this. It is no effing fair. And I think it gives you even more distillation, is where I would focus. So I would just let yourself feel the angry feelings. It's not fair. It makes me mad. I always tell people I am mad on your behalf when you have to say goodbye to a baby, somebody less than middle-aged, somebody. It's just not fair. It's also not fair, it also still hurts like hell when they're beyond their normal lifespan. You've had so much time to love them, but it's especially unfair with cancer in young animals. And so you got to let yourself get mad about that and process that a little bit, because what you're feeling is very real and supremely justified. That said, you've been given extra distillation superpowers. So she still has the energy of a 4-year-old dog to the extent that she can, despite the cancer. And she still has that joy. And I think it calls for extra presence. And you're nailing it if you've already got this bucket list going before you even came to this talk. So just make sure you get your anger stuff out so that you can be present. And I really think you're going to make every moment count.
It sure sounds like she is. She's off to a good start in a tough situation. And we all just can only do the best we can do. But I think you've offered so many tips that are so beneficial, not to just us, but to our dogs. I have another here for you, Dr. Howells. I'm wondering how you walk the line of celebration and being disappointed when planning a bucket list activity. For example, if your pet used to love to fetch but can no longer run or chase, how do you find joy in just having a ball in the yard? Like seeing how things have changed for the worse. So I guess they're saying, since they're not, you've got all those balls there, but the dog isn't doing with them what, he or she used to.
It's a hard question. Yeah, it does. That's a little vulnerability moment right there where you have to recognize how far things have come. Just like that veteran whose dog had heart disease and couldn't run with him anymore, but they did what they could. I think you will still see your dog light up.
Maybe you can give him the sausage.
Yeah, well, give him yeah, but I
find
think
something else, maybe, that might.
Yeah, find something else, but also tailor things in a way that is comfortable. Music is one of the greatest joys of my life, and I can tell you that even if I can't pick up my guitar anymore at some point in my life, that doesn't mean I don't want someone to turn on my favorite songs. I think just because capacity is diminished does not mean that joy has no meaning.
I had to think on that one for a minute. That was lovely. And, I think a lot of us just don't, what is it, cliche, take time to smell the roses and slow down. And it's kind of like just being in the moment with our pets, because that's what both of you have. And just sitting, with a head in the lap and stroking and just spending that time together is so precious, because like you said, we could be rushing around trying to get to vet appointments and giving the right medicine and portioning out the food, but that together time is really, really, the best.
And the one thing I don't want to do in any of these answers is discount the pain that's here. It's painful to look at somebody you love and see that they can't do anymore the thing that brought them the greatest joy. It's painful to look at a 4-year-old with cancer and think about the 8 years you didn't have. That pain is real, and I don't ever want to discount any of that. I want to hold that. I want to make space for that. But I think it's absolutely true that just because they can't do the full expression doesn't mean that the joy they can still have is worthless. So I still think what you're doing counts so much.
Playing off that pain we've got here, I've heard many people say they're afraid to adopt again after the loss of the pet because they think they can't go through the pain of saying goodbye again. Do you have any advice for how they can heal and give another animal a second chance?
So people change a lot from the moment that they say that to the moment they adopt their next pet. And the speed on that varies greatly with whatever kind of car your soul is. So the dog that I did my bucket list day with every 6 months, he's got 2 pictures up on the wall behind me here. Oh, it's hard to aim. Anyway, there's one, there's the other. You can't really see him in those pictures. But it took me 3.5 years after he died until I was recovering a puppy in anesthesia and sitting there with his head on my lap and think, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could see myself doing that again. And I'm only 45, so I better have like a lot more pets left in my lifetime. But I also, some of my favorite people are the people who they tell me in the euthanasia appointment, I can never do this again. The heartbreak is too much. I just can't withstand it. And then I call them 3 days later to hug them through the phone. And they say to me, oh my God, I don't know what happened. I just found my car turning into the parking lot of the shelter. And I'm like, I knew it. But, so the heart wants what the heart wants, and the speed is different for everybody, and the speed is fine for everybody. And all of that is fine. However, I do say to people exactly what I said a few slides before the end when I said, I am so honored to have gotten to witness the love you shared with this pet we're saying goodbye to now. And whenever you're ready, another pet needs that love. And I just leave it at that. I don't put any pressure. I'm just like, it's clear to me that you have love to share is the only message I want to deliver. It's no pressure, but it's clear to me from seeing this situation that you have love to share. And that's it. And then we each got to come to it on our own. But I will tell you that I rarely think, so there are people who tell me I walked out of here and got my next pet the next day, even though I said I would never do it again. And then there are people like me who wait years. But I changed phone services for my house call euthanasia practice. And I was worried about losing touch with people because I also occasionally get a message from somebody a year and a half, 2 years after I took care of their pet with a picture of their new one. And I treasure those. So I will just tell you that I think statistically speaking, the rarity of people keeping that commitment to never do it again is pretty rare.
Well, that That's good to know. We all have our own time frames, and obviously, one pet never replaces another.
It's just a whole new
You know, all of
relationship.
us at Gray Muzzle, you know, we want people to adopt senior dogs because so many of them need homes and they need that love. And when I lost one of my dogs, somebody once told me that grief is love with no place to go. And it kind of is that because you've been loving that pet for so long, and now there is no physical dog, you know, it's always here in the heart. So, you know, when the time is right, we all make that step, and it's a wonderful new step. And, you know, sometimes I think our previous dog or cat sent us that new one too in some sort of
Right.
way.
Well,
Dr. Howells, this has been so wonderful and so enlightening. We can't wait to go back and rewatch and pick up some things we didn't. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and just your perspective and sensibility to this difficult subject.
thank you so much for having me. It's such a joy. And just one more time, this is my contact information. So no matter where in the country you are or what you have to say, I'm happy to hear from you.
Thank you so much. And you know, let's close with you on that glitter moment. Let's all look for that glitter, you
Yeah.
know, to keep those tails wagging, or just the hearts and eyes full of light and brightness. So thank you everybody for joining in today. I hope you'll join us again in July on the 17th at noon Eastern time, when we have a webinar on disaster preparedness for senior pets. And as I close, I just want to thank you wholeheartedly from the bottom of my heart and the tips to every dog's wagging tail for, you know, supporting the Gray Muzzle, because you're going to be hearing more in the coming weeks. But we are, thanks to you, we are crossing that $1 million mark in being able to give out more than $1 million in grants to rescues and shelters around the country and beyond this year. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You've all truly made a difference. Bye-bye for now. And remember, you can watch the recording. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Howells.
Thank you.